let's just keep on Archie Gray for a sec, because I think you said to me before you played with his dad.
I did, yeah. I played with Andy Gray.
That's a great claim to fame.
Yeah, at Charlton. And what a fantastic guy. Looks similar persona to Archie, actually. He was very level-headed. He was a centre forward. If he went out and played and missed an opportunity, he wouldn't let that affect him. He just took each game as it came, each opportunity as it came, and a real nice family guy off the pitch. And my wife pointed this out to me yesterday. We were there when Archie was a baby. I think he was either newborn or one. He was a tiny baby, and it's crazy to see.
That's crazy.
I didn't even realise that was the issue.
That was the
because
kid.
he'd grown up so quick, and he's in a Spurs team. I see when Spurs played Ipswich, I see Andy, and I was like, what are you doing here? And he was like, oh, my son's playing? And I was like, of course, put two and two together.
It obviously looked different to when you last saw Archie when he was a baby.
A little bit, yeah.
Still a baby, though, isn't he?
Yeah,
He's still a baby. He's 18. We were talking about it before. He's technically still in sixth form, but he's just doing such an unbelievable...
Incredible.
An unbelievable
football family as well. As I said, his dad, his uncle, his granddad, I think, all played. And real credit as well, it seems like. He doesn't look like he's ever going to be in trouble in the media or stuff like that.
Cool,
hopefully.
calm, collected. Ange absolutely singing his praises, saying, it's his first season in the Premier League. I know he had a really great season at Leeds last year, and Leeds fans were gutted to lose him. Yeah. Linked with Brentford as well, was getting a few little jabs yesterday, wasn't he, from the crowd? Yeah. But to come in and I think have the reliance, we all know that we probably wouldn't have seen Gray and Bergvall if it wasn't for all the injuries. We would have seen them probably in the Europa League games, couple cup games, but you guys are absolutely right. It's fast-tracked their progress so much, both of them, and in particular Archie Gray, who has barely even played his position, in midfield. He's been left back, right back, centre back, and he's made that role his own. That actually, I forget sometimes that he isn't actually a centre back. He's looked better than Dragusin when Dragusin that's his actual full-time role. So I think we've got a really, really special player there, and obviously I want to make sure we hold on to him. But I think that they are definitely the future, him and Bergvall.
Well, I think future leader as well, like you said, like he's got that maturity. Again, like you said, dealing with difficult circumstances. Yesterday, the Brentford fans were getting on his back, and also, like I said earlier, you watch that second goal back and you see like Spurs playing out from the back under pressure. It's Gray the one that kind of beats that press. He has men coming onto him. He gets around them, shows that composure, plays it out to the wing, and then we move it inside. It's him that's kind of starting that move. He's actually like, when you think about how Spurs play, and Romero is so good at kind of beating the press and breaking the lines with his passing. Gray has kind of actually filled in that role really well because he's had Dragusin alongside him, who, let's be honest, isn't the greatest on the ball. His strengths come more in the defensive side of the game. And that's great, but also Spurs need to be able to play out from the back. I know we saw a very different Spurs yesterday, but that is what Ange's system relies on. Yeah. And Gray has done that really, really well, showed so much composure. And, Ange gave him his flowers in the interview after the game yesterday, and he said, I just don't think people realise how good this kid is, and I don't think people realise what a job he is doing. Playing at centre-half in the Premier League at 18 years of age.
In your first season.
And in a position that he's never played. Fair enough, right, if Archie Gray was... last season, I think people do forget that he actually played more games at fullback for Leeds last year than he did in midfield, even though he has been bought as a long-term six for Spurs, and I think that's where most people would see his best position as being. But coming in at centre-half and doing that is just ridiculous, and he just doesn't look out of place, and you think about how good he's going to be when he goes into that position, and this is going to be an England international 100%.
Oh, absolutely.
Agreed. I was just going to say exactly the same thing, and we talk about he's naturally a six, but sometimes it's situations like this that you are developed into another position. And if you look at the England setup now and the centre-backs that's coming through at the moment, if he really wanted to cement a place, I think he could stick at this position.
Yeah, I think
be a ball-playing centre-half that likes to travel out, that everyone wants, because he's taken to it like a duck to water. And yes, he's clearly played there before because he knows his role, but his calmness and his confidence at 18 to play centre-half in the Premier League against some of the forwards that he's played against, I can see him being a future international at that position.
I think so. And I think as well, when you think about, obviously, it's great for Spurs to kind of have those utility men and versatile players, especially when you've got an injury crisis, someone that can kind of fill in these positions. But like we said before, you'd expect that from maybe like if Eric Dyer was still here or a Ben Davies who is experienced and can do any job that you need them to do for you. But an 18-year-old kid, that's going to stand him in really good stead for England as well, because when it comes to selecting squads for tournaments, you need players that are going to be able to play in multiple positions. And if you get an injury, look at, also, like you said, look at Declan Rice, for example, when he came through at West Ham. He came through as a centre-back and developed into a midfielder.
Yep. Or Ledley King. Ledley King didn't start off as a centre-half. I think he started off as a...
He was he made his debut for Spurs, I think, in midfield. Like, your career can maybe take you down paths that you don't expect. And I would love to see Gray in midfield, but the fact that he could be a quality centre-back is also really exciting.
Darren, let's talk a little bit about you and kind of like your memories of Spurs. Because as we said, maybe people didn't know so much that you were a Spurs fan until you started here at talkSPORT and people got to kind of know you more than just the footballer, Darren. What's like your earliest memory then of going to Spurs? Were you there like on the terraces as a kid?
Well, no, not really. My parents couldn't afford to take me to a lot of games. My actual first game, my sister won a competition on the radio.
Really?
Believe it or not.
Was it on talkSPORT?
This was 1993 or 92, 93. I think I was 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I went to White Hart Lane. Obviously, my earliest memory was the 1991 FA Cup final. Favourite player was Gazza.
Nice.
People like I had the Gazza and Lineker poster on my bedroom wall, and my sister won this competition on the radio for 2 tickets.
That's
and
so
said to me and my dad that why don't you go? So I went to Spurs Aston Villa. We actually lost 5-2 that game, but it was a moment I'd never forget. It was the first time I got to witness White Hart Lane. Got to go with my dad, who was a West Ham fan, by the way. So,
how did you end up as a Spurs fan? Was that because of Gazza?
Yeah, my granddad, my dad, they were both West Ham fans. They were obviously coaxed me, trying to get me a West Ham fan. But I loved Gazza as a player, and a lot of my friends were Spurs supporters as well. I grew up in Harlow in Essex. It was Spurs or West Ham. A lot of my friends were Spurs, and I just went that route, which is it's unlikely. Like normally you follow in your dad's footsteps, but. Yeah, it was the first memory going, even though we lost, I was hooked from then on.
It's so funny because whenever I ask people, like, well, what's your first memory of Spurs? What was your first game? I don't think I've ever had someone that said that the first game they ever saw us win.
Mine was a loss as well. Bolted at home in 2004.
Mine was a draw. Mine was a draw against Blackburn.
I don't know.
Why were we hooked so much?
After that, you're just like, I want more. I want more of this pain, more suffering.
Imagine having, like you said, obviously Gazza was kind of the reason that you wanted to support Spurs. Like, imagine that now. Imagine Spurs haven't really got that sort of player that you'd be like.
Well, it would have been Kane or Kane or Son.
Yeah. I suppose also football was kind of different then in terms of like the way you'd see players and stuff like that. It was just like there was maybe more mavericks in the game, I guess, that when you were kind of growing up deciding who to support. And it was like, are there enough players in the game now that kind of grab you in that way that, like someone like, obviously Gazza was before my time, but like the way people like you speak about him from kind of, and like my stepdad's generation and stuff like that, the effect that he had on people is just like...
Well, it's like I was 6 or 7 when we won the FA Cup, and I remember the semi-final, Gazza scoring that free kick and against Arsenal, and then to see him get injured in the final was horrible, even though we picked up. And I actually ended up training with Gazza.
Did you?
Yeah, and it was a crazy situation. The relationship he had with Sir Bobby Robson. I went to Newcastle, and he came in and he said, "Right, we've got a new player coming in. This is what the manager said. He's going to train with us for a couple of days." And he walked through the door, and like it brought back those memories of being 6 or 7. Although I was playing in the Premier League for Newcastle, bring back those memories. And I'd already had an interview when I first arrived. Favourite player, this growing up, and I said Gazza, and 2 days he was training. He scored probably the best goal I've ever seen in training. One day he was awful. The next day he scored a half volley Rabona from about 20 yards into the top corner. But the next following game, I went to Newcastle, and at reception was a gift wrapped up. And
for you?
For me, not to this day, I've not seen Gazza since.
Yeah.
But they said it was from him, and it was a signed picture of him in the 1990 World Cup when he was crying. And I've had a place in my house, but I never actually got to ask him, was that you? Like,
we can send him a direct message on Inside Spurs, being like, Gazza, firstly come on the show.
But it shows what kind of guy he was.
Yeah.
He obviously heard, he knew how much I idolised him as a player, and he done that for me.
So nice.
It's quite a place in my house.
Nice. Well, so obviously you never played for Spurs, but were you ever like close to even joining, or would it have been your dream move?
There was talks.
There was talks.
Yeah, when I was at Ipswich, I obviously came through, and I broke through at a young age, 17, I think I was, and I ended up signing for Newcastle. But there was discussions with my representatives, with Arsenal as well, and that didn't come to fruition. I wasn't one of those players to sign for the opposition. We all know who those are. A few of them in this
few of them upstairs. I was going to say, how would you have felt with that? Like, as a Spurs fan, I know obviously it's a job, and I think this is where maybe I can't take my... What?
Yeah.
You can and you can't take your mind out of it. And also, if the money's right, the money's right. But how would you have done that if you're a Spurs fan and you're playing for your biggest rival?
Like I mentioned before, as a player, you kind of switch off from those emotions. It still was at the time. I think the representatives of Arsene Wenger messaged my agent and said about come and talk to us before you sign for Newcastle. And I still was a bit, but that's Arsenal. And my representative, my family was like, yeah, but if the move is right for your career, and look, my best friend in football is Darren Bent, and we spoke about this a lot. And the emotions have to turn off when it's your job and your career. Yeah, it's only afterwards. Now, if I would have signed for Arsenal now. Well, I probably wouldn't be on this show, to be honest, but I wouldn't have liked it after I ended my career. I'd have thought, why did I do that? But if it was the best thing at the time, which it wasn't, and that's why I ended up signing for Newcastle.
Like you said, it's so hard to picture that. Like, as just a normal fan, you just think, no, I would never, ever do that. And it's still like...
I think the same as you now, though.
Yeah.
I think, no,
I could never
to my
do
old
that.
self, no, don't dare. But
if it's to do with your career and its progression, and obviously you get one career, you want to make sure...
At the time, it was Arsene Wenger. He was bringing through a lot of the young players, English players as well. So it was. It can
be like an inside operative, though, couldn't you? You could have tried to bring them down from the inside.
Certainly could have.
Yeah, that would have been my angle.
Well, who would have been the Spurs manager when you would have had that same?
What year was that?
So that would have been 2004.
So it could have been
2003.
Santini,
but just before Yol, maybe.
Before Yol, I think.
Look, a lot of it is talk in these situations. And I just remember my agent saying to me and my family, while I was sat there at Newcastle having discussions, we need to go and speak to Spurs, Arsenal, I think Aston Villa at the time as well. We need to go and speak. And I was closer to talk to Aston Villa than I was to the other two, And
Did you ever beat Spurs when you played against them?
I don't think so, no. I don't think so. I get asked this a lot as well. How would you have felt if you'd have scored? You'd have loved that, yeah. I was desperate to score at White Hart Lane.
Yeah.
Not against Spurs, but just to say, and I never did for a club. I did for England under 21s. We played France in a qualifier for the Euros, and I ended up scoring the equaliser. And I was buzzing because it was at White Hart Lane.
Best feeling in the world.
Yeah, best feeling in the world. Probably one of the best feelings I had scoring, just because it was at the home of Spurs. So
well, that's what the kids were saying the other night, wasn't it? Ajayi and Moore and Dane Scarlett. You know, I think it was Ajayi that said on Mikey Moore that scoring in front of that massive South stand and. I mean, that's got to be like the best feeling ever, especially if you support Spurs. You come through the academy, like you're one of our own, and then you score on your senior debut, and
in a European game as well, like that. When you think of the European history that Spurs have got, I know it was kind of, Spurs should have won that game. It was against Elfsborg, like Mikey Moore's goal, for example. We were 2-0 up at a last-minute goal, but it was like and the way that the other players were so pleased for them as well. I was sitting there in the South Stand the other night, that game, and it was like all of them just get off the bench. All of the injured lot just get up from their sick bed.
There was a lot of them.
There was a lot, There's probably more of them than there was on the bench. And it was just like, you see how pleased they were for the youngsters.
Our times have changed as well, by the way, because if that was when I was played, we'd have to be in our tracksuits or suits.
Yeah. See some of the club that there were.
It's like a Paris Fashion Week.
It was literally like fashion. That picture of them where they couldn't all fit in the photo because there's so many injuries.